It is absolutely wild that I'm doing this right now. Hi, welcome back. Welcome back. It's been so long. It's been a really long time, almost 2 months since I posted a video at this point. I bet you guys did not miss the squeaking chair. Oh my God, okay. I'm not going into it right now. Like, this is not what this video is. I will just say that my life has been crazy and I've got a vlog coming out in just a few days where I'm gonna be talking about what's been going on with me, where I've been, what I'm up to. And so all of that will be addressed in that video. It's coming out on Saturday, I believe, Sunday, the 4th, whatever the day the 4th is. This is great. I feel so excited to be back in front of a camera doing this thing and talking to you about books because I've really truly missed making booktube videos. Today I'm gonna be doing a November wrap up. It's the last day of November and it's time to wrap up all the books that I read in the month of November. Plus I'm gonna talk about the one book, I'm sort of gonna talk about the one book that I read in the month of October because I didn't do an October wrap up because I only read one book. I have 8 books to talk about. That includes the one book that I read in October. And I'm excited to jump into this. I don't have any stats. I don't have anything to talk to you about. I'm just getting back into the swing of things. I don't even know if I know how to talk about books anymore because it's been so long, but I'm gonna just give it my best shot. Hopefully this turns into something really great and you'll watch it and love it and we'll be back on the same page. With all that being said, let's jump into the November wrap up. I'm not talking about these books in any particular order, any specific order. I'm not gonna talk about them like in the order I read them or at least to most favorite. I have a couple of categories and so that's how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna talk about the sort of book first because I haven't technically finished this book yet, but I will finish it by the time November is over and I'm not gonna wanna wait until the end of the month, like the end of December, to talk about it. I want to talk about it now. So that's what I'm gonna do. And that book is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is on my 2022 TBR, my 5-star predictions, and let me just tell you, this book is doing it for me. It's gonna be a 5-star read. Like, I have no doubt in my mind. I've thought that it's gonna be a 5-star read since about page 100, and right now it's teetering on like favorite book of the year territory, so that's exciting. This book is an adult fantasy book and it follows a guy named Zachary Ezra Rollins. He is a grad student and at the start of the story he is in his school's library and he comes across this book that seemingly shouldn't be there. It has no author, no copyright date, like no title page, anything like that. It's just this book that's on the shelf and he is immediately intrigued by it. So he checks it out and he takes it home and he starts reading and he quickly realizes that there's something very odd about this book. Specifically, one of the stories, one of the sections of this book seems to be about him and he is then swept into this mystery, this whimsical tale all about this place called the Starless Sea. He meets some people along the way that both help and hinder his journey in discovering who he is and what this book means to him, and it is absolutely fantastic. That description of it doesn't really do it justice, to be honest. Like, there's so much about this book and it is so good. It is like the perfect amount of whimsical, flowery writing mixed with a sort of thrilling plot. I mean, I wouldn't say this book is fast-paced by any means, but it's definitely keeping me hooked. I'm bummed that I'm filming this video right now. As excited as I am to be filming this video, I'm bummed that I'm having to do it right now instead of just reading the rest of this because I'm so close to the end. I only have this much of the book left, and as soon as I'm done filming this video, I'm gonna go finish it because it's amazing. I'm absolutely loving it. Obviously, Erin Morgenstern is the same author who wrote The Night Circus, and The Night Circus is a book that I have always said is one of my favorites ever since I read it. It was a 5-star read for me. It's one that I really need to reread just to kind of solidify that like favorite feeling of it, and this one is just as good, if not better. Honestly, it's kind of better. It's one of those books that you have to dedicate the time to reading it because you're not going to have all the answers until you finish the book. It plays with time and magic and it's just, everything about it is great. The reviews on Goodreads are fairly middling. Like, it has some good reviews and it has some really bad reviews, but for the most part, I've only seen like 3-star reviews for it, and I don't know how people are giving it 3 stars because it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I actually, in that vlog that I said at the beginning is coming out in a few days, I'm vlogging myself reading this book. So you can see like my full thoughts as I'm reading it in that video that's coming out in just a few days. It's amazing. If you haven't read it yet, I would highly recommend, highly recommend doing so. Next, I'm gonna talk about the one book that I read in October, and I'm only gonna talk about it briefly because I didn't really care for it and I don't really wanna go into too much detail, and that is the 3rd book in the Brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark, and that was Savage Lover, which feels wrong to say for some reason. This is, like I said, the third book in this companion series all about these siblings that are involved in the Italian and Irish mafia in Chicago. This follows, I can't remember, I think Nero, one of the brothers in the Italian mafia family. I didn't really care for this. I read the first 2 books back in September and I really enjoyed book 1 and I liked book 2, and so I read book 3 in October, and it didn't really do anything for me. I did not feel connected to the characters. I didn't really understand like why they liked each other. It seemed like their romance relationship sort of came out of nowhere. There wasn't any really great like build up to their relationship. They didn't have like great tension. There just wasn't enough for me. It was definitely a letdown compared to how I felt about the first 2 books. And so that's kind of put me off of reading the series, even though I definitely want to read the rest of the books in the series at some point. I just have not prioritized finishing it because I was so let down by book 3, but I am gonna get around to reading the final books in the series at some point, maybe before the end of the year, who knows, probably not. But yeah, this just didn't really do much for me. It just kind of let me down in terms of how I felt about the first 2 books. I was really excited to keep going. Although I will say that like this particular couple, like the brother Nero or whatever, was like one of my least favorite characters of the first 2 books. So I wasn't like expecting to absolutely love it. I just thought I would like it more than I did. Next up, I'm going to briefly mention 2 books that I'm actually not going to go into a ton of detail about in this video because I have another video coming out later in December where I'm going to actually fully review both of these books. The first of those is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. This is an adult mystery thriller and it's a debut by this author. It follows a woman who had something traumatic happen to her when she was a little girl. Her father was arrested and convicted of killing 6 girls in her hometown, and then like 20 years later, the 20th anniversary of this event is coming up and girls in her new town have started disappearing in a very similar manner and then show up dead. And so she's sort of like thrown back into these feelings and emotions that she felt when she was originally experiencing this trauma. I really didn't care for this. Ultimately, I found it very predictable. I pretty much like had 2 theories at the very beginning of the book. I basically had 2 theories about how the book was gonna go. And somewhere around like the 25% mark, I realized that one of them was so obviously a red herring that it could only be the other possibility. And then I turned out to be right, which is disappointing. I don't know, I think about thrillers too much because I read so many of them and I'm so kind of attuned to what's popular in thrillers, but I always kind of want to have some kind of surprise, or I want the reveals to be plausible even if I do predict them. And this one, in this case, I predicted it way too early, so it really just ruined my enjoyment of the story. I do think this author has a lot of promise and I probably will read more from her in the future. This just didn't really work for me. But if you're new to thrillers and you're looking for some kind of like entryway into the genre, then I think this would be a really great one to pick up. The other book that I'm going to talk about in that later video is The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. I read another book by this author last year, The Sundown Motel, and I really enjoyed it, so I was excited to read her 2022 release. This one follows a woman who has a bit of an obsession with true crime, and she actually runs a blog where she tells stories of cold cases that have not been solved before. At the start of the book, she meets a woman named Beth Greer who is sort of infamous in their town for potentially killing a couple of men back in the 70s. She was acquitted of the crime, but people still think that she was guilty. This woman agrees to do an interview for the main character, whose name is Shay, I think. So Shay starts going to this woman's house and she realizes that there is much more to this story than anybody realizes. She sort of gets involved in the mystery of what exactly happened in the 70s and who Beth is and what her role in the whole thing is. I thought this was really good. I really like the way that Simone St. James crafts her characters and stories. I found this to be not predictable in like a right off the bat kind of way. I did sort of see some of the reveals coming, but I definitely was surprised by a couple of things that happened. I had a couple of theories that I was going to be disappointed if they turned out to be correct, and then they didn't, so I was happy about that. I do think that I will continue to read books by this author in the future. I think she's just really talented. Her mysteries do tend to lean a little bit more on the paranormal side. There's always like a little bit of a supernatural element to her books, which I don't always enjoy, but for some reason she does a good enough job that it doesn't really bother me. So if that's something that you're looking for, like more of a supernatural kind of thriller, then I definitely recommend giving Simone St. James a try. And in particular, I think this is a really great book, so I would recommend it. All right, so the last category is just like the rest of the books that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about than I did for all the others. The first book that I'm going to talk about is Saga Volume 10 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is the very long-awaited 10th volume to the Saga graphic novel comic series that was super popular about 4 years ago. They took like 2 or 3 years off, four years maybe. I don't remember when Volume 9 came out, but essentially Volume 9 came out and then the author and illustrator said, we're gonna take a hiatus from the series and then we'll come back. And this year they finally came out with the next few issues and then obviously the subsequent volume. Saga is a sci-fi like space opera series following this family who shouldn't exist. Essentially, the main couple in the original volumes is a man and a woman who are from warring planets, and at the beginning of the book they have a baby, and so they are constantly being hunted by forces from both sides of this war to basically kill these two people and their child because they shouldn't exist, they shouldn't be together. The 10th volume picks up like I think 3 years after the end of Volume 9, so what happened at the end of Volume 9 happened, and then we flash forward 3 years and we pick back up with our characters, and I really enjoyed being back with these characters in this world. Like, I do think it's a really fun graphic novel series, but unfortunately I have sort of moved away from comics and graphic novels in general. I just don't read a lot of that stuff anymore. It's just not something that compels me. And I do think that having such a large gap of time between Volume 9 and Volume 10 was to the series' detriment, because I didn't have any desire to go back and reread the first 9 volumes of the series, but I didn't really remember enough of what happened to really understand or be as connected to Volume 10 as I wanted to be. I sort of remembered things, like things came back to me as I was reading, and obviously like there's some big stuff that happened in the first 9 volumes that I did remember, but the little things that play into like the side storylines and stuff of this series just weren't in my brain anymore, so I didn't end up loving this as much as I was hoping I would. I'm not really sure if I'm going to continue on with it at this point. I kind of think that maybe it's done for me. Like, I know that they have a lot more planned for it. I think it's going to be a pretty epic story, and maybe eventually I will go back and read all of the volumes and catch up, but I might wait for there to be a few more volumes out before I like jump back into the series, just because I don't think that I love it as much as I used to, and I don't think that I'm gonna want to just like immediately pick up the new volumes as soon as they come out anymore. I mean, I still do recommend Saga. It's still a really fun graphic novel series, but I definitely think that if you're gonna read Volume 10, you probably need to at the very least reread Volume 9 and maybe even some of the other ones as well, just to get like the full context of Volume 10, because it was kind of hard to just jump back in without really remembering too much about the original series. Next up, I have a novella that I listened to on audio, and that was Into the Riverlands by Nevo. This is the 3rd book in the Singing Hills cycle, which is a series of companion novellas following a cleric named Chi, whose job is solely to just go around the world and collect the stories of the people that they come across. This one is following Chi as they are traveling to a new location, and they come across these 2 sort of warrior people, and then also an old married couple that have a sort of secret history that you sort of learn about as the book goes on. And just like the other volumes, I thought it was really fun. This series really tackles like morality sort of in a really interesting way. I think it feels almost like a fairy tale or a fable, in that there's sort of a message, a point to the story at the end of it, but ultimately it's just about the people of this world and Chi collecting their stories, and I'm really excited to continue on with the series whenever the 4th one comes out. It's one that I think I could just see myself continuing to read for as long as the author chooses to publish books about Chi, because I have so much fun reading them, and I really enjoy following the adventures and the stories and learning so much about this like sort of mythology that is told in these books. Next up, I'm going to talk about A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. This is the 1st book in the Veronica Speedwell series. This is a Victorian mystery series following a woman named Veronica Speedwell, who is a lepidopterist, which means she travels the world and she specializes in finding rare butterflies. At the start of the book, her guardian, or like the woman that raised her, has passed away, and she hasn't really been in contact with her guardian for a couple of years. She's been off on various adventures, and she returns to England to take care of this woman, and then she obviously passes away, and she's getting ready to leave on her next adventure when someone breaks into her house and attempts to kidnap her. She's rescued by a German baron who takes her to his friend Stoker's place to sort of be guarded, to be protected, while the baron looks into what exactly is going on and why Veronica was attempted to be kidnapped kidnapped. And at the very beginning of the book, the Baron turns up dead. And so Veronica and Stoker are sort of thrust together into a mystery of finding out exactly what happened to their mutual friend and why Veronica is being hunted by whoever she's being hunted by. I have heard great things about this series for so long, and so I finally decided to read the first book this month, and I really enjoyed it. I really loved the connection that Veronica and Stoker had, and I really liked seeing their relationship sort of grow over the course of the book. I do know from other people's reviews that the romance between these two is fairly slow burn, like it doesn't really happen for several books, and I do think that's kind of annoying just because they already had like some tension, some sexual tension, some chemistry like 40% into this first book. So I don't really want to like have to wait 4 more books or whatever for them to finally get together. But I did overall really enjoy this book. I thought the mystery was fun. I didn't think it was like overly surprising or anything. I definitely saw a lot of the twists and turns coming. And it's not a traditional mystery in the sense of like you're supposed to try to guess what happens. I think it's pretty well laid out for you. It's just about Veronica and Stoker kind of solving it. And I did think that their relationship was fun, and I liked watching them try to solve the mystery together. They have some banter between them that made the relationship all the more enticing, and I will definitely be continuing on with this series at some point. I'm not like in a huge hurry to read the next book because it seems like a series that could ultimately fall into like a formula where every book's the same, and so I don't really want to read a bunch close together. I'm gonna kind of spread them out over the course of a few months or whatever. But I did really like it. I do understand why people love the series, and I'm excited to continue on with it whenever I do get around to reading the next book. And the final book I have to talk about for this wrap up is probably my favorite book that I ended up reading in the month of November, aside from the Starless, obviously, because I haven't quite finished that one yet, and that is The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. This is another adult mystery thriller that follows a woman who is a mystery thriller author, and at the start of the book she gets engaged to this man who is from one of like the wealthiest families in the United States, but she's never actually met his family. Shortly after she meets this guy's family, her soon-to-be father-in-law gives her a tape of a book idea that he has, and so she starts listening to this tape and she realizes that what is on this tape could have actually happened, and it could implicate her soon-to-be father-in-law in several murders. She sort of gets drawn into the mystery of exactly what is going on with this family and whether or not the events on this tape actually happened or if they're made up. And it is a wild ride. You definitely have to suspend your disbelief a lot to buy into this story, but it's such a fun book. Like, I had so much fun listening to this audiobook because I never knew what was going to happen next. I was constantly surprised. There were so many twists and turns. It was something that I definitely could not have predicted if I wanted to. Well, I probably could have predicted it if I wanted to, but I went into it and I was having so much fun with it that I never really gave myself the chance to theorize or anything. If you've seen the movie Ready or Not, which came out a couple of years ago, this is really similar to that. It's not exactly like that. Obviously, there's some differences, but it's similar. It has a similar feeling, and I definitely enjoyed this book just as much as I enjoyed that movie. So if you're looking for something that's like that, then I would definitely recommend checking this book out. And if you have read this book and you're looking for something similar to this book, then I would definitely recommend watching Ready or Not because it is a great comparison. So those are all the books that I read in the month of November, plus the one book that I read in the month of October. It is really great to be back into this swing of reading thing that I've got going on. I'm really excited to be back to making videos, and like I said at the beginning of the video, I've got so much stuff coming up in December that I hope you're ready for a ton of videos from me because I'm finally have the time to make videos again, and I'm just so excited to be back in this space and doing this thing. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video and what you thought about them. Do you have similar or different opinions to me? I'd really love to know. Also, let me know some books that you read in the month of November, or maybe your favorite book that you read in November. I'd really love to know that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!